Радіо UA Chicago.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone who listens to us online. It's Radio UA Chicago. We are live on 12:40 a.m. And today we have a special guest, Managing Director of Next Gen Logistics Capital, Jim Gamache. Do I pronounce it right?
Actually, just a little bit differently, it's Gamache.
Gamache. I am so sorry.
It's okay. It's softer and gentler.
Okay, Jim, hello and welcome you to our radio station. It's the first time, by the way, we're doing interview in English here.
Great.
So, Jim, it's not a secret. We met recently on the 8th anniversary of Revive Soldiers, a non-profit that helps severe wounded soldiers to get back to life. Tell us, how are you related to Ukraine, and how do you know about Ukraine?
Well, I'm actually, of course, with that last name, I'm not Ukrainian. But
people can tell.
I'm going to throw a few Ukrainian words out in a little while.
But if someone watches us on YouTube or Facebook, they can see how you look. You look like Ukrainian, even more than me.
I'm not as sturdy as you are.
Come on.
It all started back a year ago, September in 2022. I had decided to take a trip to Poland, just as I normally do, taking my backpack of about 16, 17 pounds. I'd always wanted to see Krakow. I wanted to visit Auschwitz, and I had an extra day, and instead of going to the salt mine tour or doing something else, I said, you know what, I'm going to go over to the border, take the bus ride over and see what I see. Before I continue, just to give you a little bit more about my background and my interest, I was a political science major in college, and then also I'd say somewhat of a history buff. I was born on the anniversary of D-Day, June 6th, and then also my father was a flyer during World War II, was shot down over Romania and was a prisoner of war there. So I've gravitated towards understanding more of the history of Europe, and particularly Eastern Europe, and feel comfortable in knowing enough that I get it. But going back to my visit to the border, got to the border, it was a rainy, dreary day, and got off, and I started asking some questions, went to a UN tent and said, hey, can I cross the border? And they said, well, sure, do you have a passport, a U.S. passport? I said, yes. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And at that moment, I realized that I was making a mistake, because if I had simply gone across the border and stood on Ukrainian land, I'd be nothing more than a tourist. So I didn't do that, but then I came back, had to wait 3 or 4 hours, and I entered a very small cafe with a counter, and I was sitting there with a bowl of good soup and a beer, and a young mother, along with a young child, about 5 years old, came in, and she had gone up to the counter, and she was trying to buy a soda for her son, and the woman at the counter was holding the can prior to giving it to her, but then all of a sudden she pulled it away. And it just seemed a bit odd. So I went up to the woman and, excused myself to say, excuse me, is something wrong? She said, well, I don't have any currency. I have no money, but I do have a credit card, but they don't take credit cards. And so I asked if I could take care of that, buy the young child a soda, and we did that. And I said, can we talk for a bit? She said, of course. And I said, where are you coming from? You've crossed the border from Ukraine into Poland. She said, well, I just saw my husband for the first time in 5 months, and I wanted him desperately to see his son, his 5-year-old son. And I said, but where are you going now? And she said, well, we have an apartment in England, and that's where we're going to go. I said, but then what? And she said, I don't know. So it really touched me. But then she said, you're an American, correct? Yes. She said, I want to thank you and your country for your incredible support. God bless you. It stuck with me. On the bus ride back to Krakow, I said, I've got to figure out how to go and help. So for the next several months, I was trying to figure out how to go to Ukraine in some capacity, somehow to help. I reached out to the State Department. That was the first mistake. I realized that they certainly weren't going to help you or guide you in regards to coming to Ukraine. And certainly it was very difficult if you're not an EMT, you're not a doctor, you don't speak Polish, you don't speak Ukrainian. But through one of those things that happen, I'll use the word serendipity, and it seems like I use it quite frequently. Someone connected with me on LinkedIn who had been in transportation, and that's been my background. And we ended up talking, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he said, "Jim, I can help you do that." And he helped navigate my trip to get me across the border easily into Lviv, and had a person there that I refer to as my safe person. She was wonderful, and gave me the names of a couple of places I could stay. So in May, I traveled to Ukraine for the first time, and I ended up volunteering at 5 different organizations. I was there, worked at frontline kitchens. I worked packing medical kits for the soldiers. I did some camouflage netting. I also traveled to Kyiv and worked with the organization called Brave to Rebuild, where we went up into the area around Bucha and helped basically clean up as opposed to rebuild. And that was a very profound day. But I came back to the United States after those 4 weeks, and I said, well, I've got to go back. But one of the things that I recognized, or I should say recognized, one of the things that, or the people that I met, was an American journalist while I was in Lviv by the name of Joe Lindsley. And he's a freelance journalist who actually, I found out, broadcast on WGN radio here in Chicago. He's on WGN radio on the Bob Sriracha Show at 7:20 every morning, and he moves around Ukraine. And we basically hit it off, and when I returned to the U.S., I asked if I came back again, if I could travel with him. I guess I had a bit of a hook because when I came back, I had a fundraiser, a reception at my country club, Stonebridge Country Club out in Aurora. And we were fortunate, along with another benefit at a local Methodist church, to raise about $25,000. And I used those funds to divide it up between some ResMed, where I volunteered. That means together, I know that in Ukrainian. And the Frontline Kitchen, and then I donated money to Joe and the efforts that he has. And one of those was actually even buying a drone. So I'll stop there and take a breath.
So first of all, on behalf of all our listeners, I want to thank you for your support to the Ukrainian community and to support of our country. It's really important to us, and it's not like words I have to say. It's what I feel from the bottom of my heart. It's important that U.S. Is with Ukraine in this war, in this battle. And going back to the moment you first visited our country, what was your first impression? Like, what did you see over there? Like, what did you remember?
Well, it took me a while to get my thoughts together, especially when I came back. But how I describe it is that I divided my time, I divided the story into 3 pieces, almost like a play into 3 acts. And it was, to me, it was peaceful Ukraine, where I saw the beauty of the country, I saw the beauty of the cities, I saw all the people there, doing the things that we like to do. People enjoying a cafe, grandparents with their children,
That's in Lviv.
That's
right?
in Lviv, yes, and people going to work, going to school. It was day-to-day life. But my interactions then were people, first of all, saying, "Why are you here?" And I said, number one, it's to let you know that we support you, that Americans and so many other international volunteers that do not have Ukrainian heritage are there supporting them, and it's so greatly appreciated. And every time, just as you thank me, I say, I'll do more, I promise. But the overwhelming openness for Ukrainians to freely give, to have deep conversations, those were very, very moving. And of course, the dichotomy of life then is what has happened with the war. And you see that on a daily basis, how they're intertwined. The normalcy of life, peaceful Ukraine, and the unfortunate parts of war. And he's seeing some of the sadness. Certainly, I can in my mind right now picture a father walking down the street with his wife and child in hand with a teddy bear, and he was getting ready to say goodbye. And you could see the love, but you could also see the stress on his face. So those are my first thoughts.
Jim, have you ever been to Russia?
I have not. The closest I've been to Russia was my recent trip to Kharkiv, which was about 30 miles. So
Like you.
That's about as close as I wanted to get.
What difference do you see between our nations, like from here, from the U.S.?
Well, first of all, I know how Ukrainians love their freedom. I'm very much aware of the Revolution of Dignity.
Today is, by the way, 10 years since that revolution started.
Yes, and my friend Joe Lindsley mentioned that on WGN Radio this morning, and I thought that it was really, so nice to be able to be here with you on that anniversary. It's something that I know that I'll remember. But certainly the love of freedom, not just the love of freedom, what I found is that Ukrainians are practicing freedom. And I actually had a soldier, we were having a beer, and he had spent some time in Chicago. His English is very good. And he said, "Jim, how do you define freedom?" And he was just saying it, just in an inquisitive type of way, and I had to think momentarily. But then later I thought, I wonder how the average American would respond to that question. And so I said, well, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom to choose your own government officials, and freedom of religion. And when you asked about a difference that I saw that would be quite obvious, is certainly freedom of religion. I see where, the old phrase, can we all just get along? And it seems like Ukrainians do. I was fortunate to participate in an interview, for example, with the chief rabbi of Ukraine, and he voiced very much the same thing. And you see that in how the government is run, with President Zelensky and his Minister of Defense. That to me, freedom of religion it stands out for me. One other thing too that stands out to me that we're lacking here, we used to have it, is two people would have a discussion, and sometimes somewhat animated discussion, two different points of view. And the old saying is, they could agree to disagree and still be friends. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think we've lost here. Too often now, people just go their own way and, barely acknowledge one side or the other. And there just isn't that common middle ground that I remember and that I see on a first-hand basis in my time in Ukraine.
People became too extreme. They were rather far left or far right, but we have to meet somewhere in the center. Joe, what do you think about the Americans? Are they all understand the importance of the battle we have in Ukraine? Are they all support us? We're not talking about the politicians, the White House or the Congress. We're talking about regular Americans we meet on the street. Are they all aware of the importance of the battle?
I'd like to say yes, but I have to say no. And that's part of my mission in regards to helping further that spreading of the knowledge, the truth. When I have the opportunity to be here with you and your audience, and when I'm with Joe Lindsley, and it's something that I think I would challenge your listening audience, that all of us need to engage our friends, non-Ukrainians, Americans, from certainly I think of all the Polish here that have been so supportive, that we need to actually probably start the conversation and ask what they know. And as we recognize here, we're governed by all these little sound bites, and too often the sound bites come from one channel, one voice. And I challenge people to get other information and to get the facts. And if they've heard something, let's do the research and say, hey, I did some research and I actually know this, to be the fact, but, please, you check it out. So it's not easy, but that's the challenge that we're faced with. We have too many people that are just kind of on the boat, just kind of going to the left, going to the right, weaving left and right, and shrugging their shoulders a bit. They're there. I believe that the American resolve is there. Certainly, as I remind them of that Ukraine's a democracy, just as Israel is, and just as Israel's been invaded by Hamas. Ukraine's been dealing with an invasion since 2014. It's not the Ukrainian war. It's what the Russians have thrown at us. So that's my challenge, and I recognize that it's not easy, but we can influence others, and that's what we have to do on a day-to-day basis.
In less than a year, there will be an election in the U.S., and even right now, lots of people are speculating on Ukraine, that where American taxpayers' dollars go, how they are spent, like why they need to go to Ukraine, why we don't focus on our internal problems, which we have a lot. So how do you understand the phrase, put America first? Does it contradict with what we were discussing previously today?
Yes, America First it goes back to many, many years ago. If you go back to prior to World War I and World War II, the United States being really an isolationist country. And we thought that we realized that, this is a big world that we have to participate in on the world stage, and you have to accept that. And I still believe that Americans will be supportive of helping Ukraine, both on a humanitarian side and militarily. Now, my concern has always been, and what we talked about earlier, the line that the government gives is that we're here to support you, for whatever it takes. My comment back is, well, give us what it takes right now, and we'll take care of this. We need more ATACMS, we need more HIMARS, we need the weapons that will allow us, that should have been here much earlier, we need those weapons to be able to move forward. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
Yeah. Jim, you are a managing director of one of top U.S. companies. Tell us, are your company, or in particular, or some other companies, interested to expand to Ukraine in the future, and what should be the circumstances for that?
Well, thank you for thinking that we're large, but we're actually quite small. But one of the things that I was able to recognize early on in my visit to Ukraine is the very knowledgeable and the depth of the IT community in Ukraine. I also recognize, being in logistics and transportation, the reliability of the Ukrainian workforce to be able to work in transportation and logistics. And in fact, my partners and I have, certainly are open, to looking at call centers, logistics companies within Ukraine. So doesn't scare us at all. We know that there would be opportunities, and we hopefully can participate that in the future. If not, that doesn't matter. That's not what we're here for. That's not what I'm here for. But certainly, I have a huge belief in seeing, after recognizing the work standards that Ukrainians have. It's very obvious.
And my last question would be, how do you see U.S.-Ukraine relationships in 5-10 years? Do you see those two countries as partners, as countries that will work closer and closer, or you see them as at some point each of them will go their own way?
I feel very strongly that we'll be much more connected. In fact, first of all, I'm sure I'll have another trip early this next year to Ukraine, and I certainly will be there for the victory party. What I tell many people, the cities Lviv, Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, what a beautiful city. they're going to explode in a good way, in a good way in regards to tourists, American businesses. I know certainly Ukrainians will welcome Americans with open arms, but I think there'll be, in some ways, a lust of Americans to be with Ukrainians when the war is over and we can grow together in the future. Certainly, as I talk to Americans now too, I remind them that there's not American blood being shed right now. And this is our fight. We need to support you in every possible way that we can. But no doubt about it, we'll be together no matter what happens in the next election or the one beyond. I have a pretty good feeling about the American people in general, and I believe that Ukraine belongs in the EU and NATO, and that's how I believe it will end up.
Most of our audience is, of course, Ukrainian, but I'm sure this interview will listen lots of Americans. And I would like to ask you to suggest something for the people who have never explored Ukraine yet, who have never heard about Ukraine, or have never tried to understand what's going on in Ukraine, to suggest something that helped you in the past to find out what's the truth and what's the lies.
The first thing that I can think of, Dmitro, is for people to watch the Netflix video Winter on Fire, because that will provide you with what you need to know regarding Ukrainians' love of freedom and their willingness to die for it, and how they will never give it up. And so to me, that is absolutely the first place to start. And then this is also, I know I apologize for not knowing the exact word, but I know it's the importance of the 90th anniversary of what transpired and so many died in the 1930s.
Genocide?
Yes, the genocide then. And Holodomor, that's right. And so from there forward, at least, to have just a little bit of history and understanding it. But the other thing, too, that I try to tell people about is, oh, by the way, there had been an agreement in 1994 called the Budapest Memorandum. We may not be here if we had lived up, if Americans had lived up to that agreement as well. So a couple of another place to look for some information and for some background.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your time and for visiting our radio station. It was a huge honor talking to you, and I am again want to say that we are Ukrainians thankful for you and for all Americans who support us, who are with us in such dark times. It's very important to understand who is your friend and who is your enemy, and you are definitely our friend, and we highly appreciate it.
Well, as I say, I promise to do more. Malo po malo, little by little, we will
by step, yeah.
We will win. Дуже дякую.
Дякую, Jim. Thank you. Hope to see you again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Радіо UA Чикаго.